மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
It's worth taking note of this knight of 5 idea and capturing it. This won't work in all occasions, but it's always an idea to consider. Take this knight, put your knight in the center, playing the light squares. You could get a pretty good initiative in return for the structural disadvantage. And then, of course, nice counterattack on the queen side here led me to mayhem. Okay, so now we have one more special game to look at. This was actually a very recent game that I played in early 2017 against the Master. And the importance of this game, as we'll see here, is I'm going to deal with this endgame that I've reached on several occasions, and an endgame that I talked about, and I already showed an example in this endgame here. But this is a very nice example, I thought. Perfect demonstration on winning these sort of dry-looking positions. So this is the endgame we were talking about with the sort of white looking completely comfortable here. He has the center, space advantage. Looks like you can make a good case for him. But the move that I've been very successful with here, and like again I said, I played some different ideas here, but I've been partial to f5, particularly because of successes like the one we see in the game here. And actually, I would like to show two games in one. I'll show one more game very quickly. This is a game that I played a year ago in late 2015, early 2016 against a strong player, 2300 plus, who actually prepared. He knew that I was going to play. He suspected I would play the Kann, and I did. And he prepared to go into this endgame with me. And his whole ambition was he just wants to make a draw. He actually offered me a draw when we got to this position, against which I was didn't really upset me, but I was like, oh well, I wonder what this guy's up to. Why did he come to the round? He just wants to blitz out 18 moves of theory and then offer a draw. So of course I declined. I played f5. Here's how that game went. Now the idea here is I want to push f4, destabilize the bishop, and of course win the f2 pawn with the fork. It's an aggressive move, but also has some downsides. Of course, I'm weakening the e5 square, the e6 pawn, so it's not without risk. But here my opponent played the move king c2, which is quite an interesting idea. I played f4. Now king d3, and that's the whole idea. I do win a pawn temporarily, but he's going to pick it up. But I was perfectly satisfied with this position because the key to winning these endgames here, or actually in general when you're playing a lower rated player or even a higher rated player, let's say you just need a win, you're looking for a win, the position's equal, you want to sort of go for these imbalances, these harmless little imbalances that don't really change the evaluation of a position, but just create some diversity here. Now, what's going on here is that, of course, here's what we have. We have bishop versus knight, which is already one piece of diversity, so to speak, and also we have some pawn structure, an asymmetrical pawn structure here. So, all right, this is going to be what I have to work with here. So, my opponent plays rook e2. I go rook f5. And I'm simply trying to win this weak h5 pawn. My opponent tries to do the same and wins my weak e6 pawn, but I was perfectly happy with this because it is well known that bishops, especially in endgames, are very effective when there's play on both sides of the board. So now I actually have this pawn majority on the king side, so I'm thinking, hey, if I get that going and my opponent gets his pawn majority going, my bishop is going to be playing a good role in stopping his ideas and facilitating mine. So that's actually my whole goal in this variation. Now, again, created some imbalances. We have a pawn structure imbalance. I'm going for the king side pawn storm now. So rook d1, king f7, activating my king a little bit, preventing any of these rook excursions. My opponent plays rook e4, rook f5, knight e5. I'm not taking this knight. I want to keep my bishop. King g8. My opponent plays rook e2. He's playing quite safe. He doesn't want me to go rook f2. I'm following my plan. h5. I'm going to push those pawns. Knight f3, g5. My opponent decides, he's going to get some counterplay. He's going to drive that rook into my position, and here he goes rook to h8. And again, now things are starting to get a little dangerous for him. I go h4, and I don't know if my opponent missed this per se, or what exactly he missed, but perhaps he thought he was winning some material here because he can give me this check, king g6, rook takes b7. But he can go pawn grabbing all he wants. My pawns here are suddenly so powerful that I can even afford to sacrifice my rook, or rather in exchange, and after pawn takes h3, it turns out that he can't stop this pawn. The king is not in time to stop it. Of course, it's going to take way more than 2 moves to get there, and the rook is completely powerless to get behind this pawn in time. Rook b8 is of course impossible. Rook h7 is impossible. So a cute little tactic here that leads to a win. So instead, my opponent played rook h6, attacking my bishop. Bishop f8, rook h7. But now what happened was this pawn storm was too strong. Rook e8. Okay, now I can't sack my rook because this rook is going to drop back. I just played h3 though. Another very nice idea. Can't take with the g pawn because I have 3 hanks. Rook e2 was played. I take on g2, and now of course I'm up a pawn, and quite a formidable pawn on g2 at that. And I was expecting my opponent to play knight g1, against which well, he's threatening rook g2. I can't stop him winning that pawn, but I can play the move rook f4, which is going to net me some of these pawns here, and I'm just going to be up 2 pawns at the end of the day, so should be winning. My opponent instead completely collapsed, played king e3, missing the simple rook takes f3, and after king takes, of course, promotion, game over. So he just resigned. I really like this game as well because I really want to stick it to my opponent after his draw attempt. So I was really happy to convert this endgame, and I actually think I won this game quite easily. I don't remember spending too much time. Didn't really exert myself too much. Simply tried to go for imbalances and then utilize them. Again, bishop versus knight, have the kingside pawn majority. That's what I utilized here. That's helped me win the game. So let's get back to the position after f5 and go through the last game I have for this appendix section, where my opponent played a very move that stunned me. He played knight e5, which I was very confused about because, of course, this doesn't stop f4. So I played f4, and then my opponent played bishop takes f4. Now, full disclosure, I actually completely missed my opponent's idea. I thought that he had blundered. I was expecting to play the move f3, thinking like, alright, well, this trade is favoring white. He has this huge pawn center, and this pawn on e3 is going to drop. Of course, I can defend it with bishop g5, but it seems like he'll just gang up on it, for example, the knight and rook, or this way, or the king will pick it up. So I thought that his plan was to play f3, banking on me taking on e3. I could try this desperado. My knight's hanging. I'm going to launch it to g3, but then he has rook h3. So again, it looks like I'm not really doing much here because if I take, he takes. Again, I'm going to probably lose this pawn. But then I was like, wait, I think the guy blundered because I can play takes, takes. Now I can play e2, and if he goes rook e1, now I have bishop h4 with a skewer. And, well, he didn't blunder that, it turns out. By the way, in a surprising turn of events, the engine finds an absolutely amazing way for white to save the game here. Rook h1. This actually doesn't stop bishop h4 because he can't take it because I promote. And now he can play the incredible move rook to g6. And the whole point here is after promotion, rook takes, bishop takes, I'm up a whole rook, but after rook e6 check, this extremely unusual geometric configuration of the rook here has led to this bishop on e1 dropping because I don't have anywhere to put my king. If king d8, then knight f7, and now he picks up the bishop. And of course, if king f8, then he has knight g6 or knight d7, and both are of course very good. So this would have led to a position where I'd be up in exchange for 2 pawns, which is around material equality. Very unusual. But instead, my opponent played bishop takes f4, which, and after this, I played knight f2, and now he played knight g6, which is his whole idea. And after this, I had to think for 40 minutes. Or I didn't have to think for that long, but that's how long I thought for here, because I was, there's so many captures and interesting variations here. And I won't cover all of them. I'll briefly mention that the logical rook g8, getting out of this attack, keeping the fork on the board, would actually not be that effective because of the powerful rook h to e1. The whole idea here is if I take on d1, there's rook e6. I'm down a rook. I'm up a rook once more, but all my pieces are hanging, and I've lost this pawn on e6. And with this rook coming to e7, I may lose a lot more. So white's initiative here is quite dangerous. And I was also trying to make this interesting idea of bishop b4 work. The whole idea is of, oh, you can have this pawn, but now after, say, king d7, one of these rooks has to drop. But then I realized my opponent has an incredible move, rook d2. Again, the idea here is after takes, takes, I'm up in exchange, rook e6 is coming. My knight is actually almost trapped. I only have 1 square, which can be taken away after knight e5. So after all of that, I realized that I had to simply go for knight takes d1, not win any material here, but go for this endgame where I actually have a temporary initiative. After bishop f6, I have a surprising threat of castling long, which would be, of course, a double attack on the knight and the d4 pawn. By the way, I don't necessarily need to play castle long. That would just be a cool concept. In the game, after my opponent played knight g6, I simply played rook d8. And it turns out my opponent is actually losing this pawn on d4. No way to really protect it. King c3 gets pinned this way. King d3 gets pinned this way. c5 saves the day. But the interest doesn't stop here. Basically, my opponent plays b3 and goes for this endgame. Now, I'm up a pawn, bishop first knight, pawns at both flanks, which seems like an easy win. But actually, I have to be careful here. If my opponent can get this knight to e4, it would actually be a fortress. You can actually set this up and test it for yourself, but that is what I realized during the game. If the knight comes to e4, my king will not be able to penetrate his position, because I won't be able to go through f6, the knight is controlling that. I won't be able to go through d6, his knight is controlling that too. I could play e5 and then put my king in e6, but then he'll simply play g4, which will take away the e5, the f5 square from my king. Basically, white can try to set up a blockade on the light squares. So I have to be a little careful here. So he plays knight f3. He's perhaps going for this knight d2, knight e4, but fortunately he's not in time here. If he plays knight d2, then I'm just in time to avoid the blockade and get my king in. So this was actually a very interesting endgame. I'm not going to do it. It's justice here. I'm going to sort of skim it with a little bit of commentary here, just to sort of showcase how I won this. But the point here is that, look, black is still, I was thinking during the game, I'm up a pawn, bishop versus knight. I know he has pawns on the light squares, but my advantage is there and I should make it count. For example, I'm already threatening to invade with my king here. So he plays a4, which I'm not sure is the best move here because he's weakening the b3 pawn. My plan, of course, if I could do it, is to play king a3 and then a4, which would fracture his pawns. But perhaps he wants to stop that. I play a6, waiting to see what he's going to do. He plays g4, now I play a5. Fixing these pawns on the light squares, which is actually what he wants, because he wants to keep those pawns on the light squares where I can't attack them with my bishop. But at the same time, they're creating lots of dark square weaknesses, and I'm also good with that. So here, I get my king to b4, now I play bishop c3. A very typical idea, dominating this knight. He goes knight g1, e5 comes, knight e2, bishop to e1. So again, now this knight is dominated by the pawn, and the bishop can't really go anywhere. Nice geometric configuration. And if he was to play king d1, which he didn't, I have a couple ways to win. The flashiest, the one that I planned, is just to sacrifice his bishop. King takes b3, king e1, king a4, simply going for king b3 and promotion. This is actually a plan that was inspired by a very famous win by Bobby Fischer himself. So I wish I could use it in this game. He didn't let me. He played knight g1. Now I played e4. And the reason this position is now completely winning for me is because this pawn on e4, very influential, and also on a light square, controls the light square. I need not just to control the dark squares here, which my bishop can do, but also the light squares. And basically because of this pawn, I was able to easily infiltrate in his position. And there was a nice finish here, actually, a very fitting finish, where this knight here got completely entombed, and he resigned in this position. The beautiful bishop on d4, completely centralized, keeping his king at bay. This knight is completely stuck. King c6, king b7 is going to pick it up. That was the end of the game. So, as I've said, this endgame here, which was the focus of these final two games, actually. I kept saying one, but I did have that other excerpt to show. Yeah, so like I said, this endgame here, I've scored 80% with it with this f5 move. I hope that you were inspired by these games I just showed here. That could show you that, hey, you can win this endgame. Like I said, both of these games were played against 2300 master level opposition. And there's actually a lot to play for in these positions if you can find the chances. As I said, keep looking for the imbalances. Keep, don't, of course, you can, it depends on your risk version, but I tend to try to keep it at a reasonable level. I don't want to just burn all my bridges. After all, draw is a natural result in chess. But this endgame actually has a lot more life than it seems. And in any case, even if the game does reach a draw, wouldn't be too disappointed. Unless I miss a win, of course. I wouldn't be too disappointed because then I'd get a full-blooded fight with chances for both sides. And if both opponents play well, then I'll take the draw. So this is the bonus appendix section here. Again, if you made it this far, awesome, congratulations. I hope these really, really helped you. As I said, these are some of my best examples, or at least most instructive examples that I have in my personal base. These games are not published anywhere. These are played These are only in my computer, so here's a little bit of hidden knowledge, perhaps. But again, I hope these games really serve you to understand how to handle some of these positions. We looked at positions where we break with b5. We looked at a game where there's no b5, but you just play in the queen side. And I try to sprinkle in a little bit of knowledge here and there, my experiences in this variation. And I can only hope that these experiences are going to be identical in your play, and you're going to be able to become a true master of the Caro Kann.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.